Tears of the Kingdom is, at the time of recording, the second latest Zelda game to be released. Launched in May 2023, this game was received relatively well, with most outlets rating it 8 or above. And I have absolutely no idea why. Tears of the Kingdom is, without question, one of the worst Zelda games I have ever had the misfortune of playing, and I've beaten Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link. The game's plot is riddled with more holes than a cheesecloth, the gameplay mechanics are boring, clunky, and unfun, the map is mostly an asset flip of Breath of the Wild, and the sequel of Breath of the Wild worked so hard to remove any trace of its predecessor, I started to wonder if Breath of the Wild had personally offended the dev's parents or something. I recently played through the entire storyline of the game so I could make my review on what overall strangely seems to be a dearly loved game. Let's get into this. The plot kickstarts with Link and Zelda exploring underneath the castle. Here, Zelda finds some murals relaying the founding of Hyrule via Zonai. After pointing at things and exclaiming, "Whoa!" you eventually make your way down to an underground cavern. Here you see a mummy being held down by a blue glowing arm. Said mummy wakes up, reveals himself to be Ganon, and attacks Link. Link, not reacting, because why would a warrior react to an attack, is severely wounded. The Master Sword is also damaged. Link then strikes back, breaking the Master Sword in the process and only scratching Ganon on the cheek. He laughs at you, then bench presses the castle. The castle deadlifts, make the ground shake, and he falls into the cave below as the floor crumbles. Zelda also falls into the darkness before having enough of Link's shenanigans and heading back through time. Link is grabbed by the glowing arm and the screen fades out. The castle rises into the air and scene is over. Now, if you're marveled by spectacles easily, that was probably one of the coolest things you've seen in a while. If you stop and think about it for a second, you laugh at the ridiculousness and absurdity of what you just saw. First, the premise. You and Zelda are under the castle exploring the gloom. However, we learn in Breath of the Wild very clearly that many of the Guardians were stored under the castle. Presumably, said Guardians were dug up in preparation of Ganon's return, meaning people were exploring and digging under the castle. So how on earth did they miss a gigantic cavern under the castle as they were digging under the castle? Next, there's the origin story of Hyrule. I guess we're supposed to be amazed by the inclusion of the Zonai. Now, if you're a casual fan of the series as I am, then you're probably completely confused on who the Zonai are. If you're a Breath of the Wild enjoyer, then you're probably also wondering where the ancient Sheikah went. You know, those people that featured heavily in the first game? Not only that, but I really do not care about the founding of Hyrule. How Hyrule got started has been retconned so many times throughout the games, be it the goddesses creating the land in Ocarina of Time, the ancient Sheikah in Breath of the Wild, the Sky Islands in Skyward Sword, etc., that I know this version will be erased in the next game. Also, why is Ganon so dumb here? Like, he wants Link and Zelda dead, hence why he attacked them. Now he has them dead to rights. Link is injured and can no longer fight. Zelda is helpless here. And what does he do? He bench presses the castle. Like, really? Why not kill them? They're the last two people standing in your way to world domination. They cannot fight back. Why do you lift the castle? I mean, is killing Link and Zelda that much harder than lifting a 100,000-ton stone castle in the air? Anyway, after that interactive cutscene, you wake up in a cave. You pick up the Master Sword to find it's still broken. After walking, climbing, and diving for a bit, you make your way to the pinnacle that grants you the view of the world. After a quick fall, you're on to the Sky Island proper. After a bit more walking, you come across a robot who gives you the Purah Pad, claiming it's from Zelda. The game then sends you to the temple where you meet Goat Boy for the first time. He tells you that you should go check out some shrines nearby. At each shrine, you gain one of three powers: Ultra Hand, Fuse, and Ascend. Upon returning to the temple, you're told that there's one more shrine that you need, and sends you on your way again. Upon returning to the temple for a second time, you finally open the door, walk out onto a balcony, put the Master Sword in a glowing ball of light. It disappears, Zelda bursts through the clouds, spoilers, then you drop down to Hyrule proper. First issue with the plot so far, the Master Sword. In the cave where you wake up, you find the Master Sword. Now at first, this doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you stop and think about it, you realize that the game is completely short-circuited by its own logic. We know that Zelda became a dragon to recharge the Master Sword so Link can stop Ganon. However, Zelda only has the Master Sword because you sent it back in time. So, because you pick up the Master Sword on the Sky Island, you currently own the Master Sword. Except so does Zelda, as she is already a dragon recharging the sword. This leaves only two solutions. Either there existed two Master Swords at the same time, or you rewrote all of history when you sent the sword back and Zelda was actually dead, but you brought her back to life as a dragon so that she could recharge the sword. Neither solution makes any sense though. There cannot exist two Master Swords, as the sword is inherently special, being given by the goddess. If there could be multiple copies of it, then why not outfit all of Hyrule with it? If you rewrote history, then that raises a whole host of other problems, like what happened before you sent the sword back. Was Zelda dead? Did she die with no hope of seeing the present? How did only this one thing change but absolutely nothing else in all of history? Did the devs put any thought into this beyond "this looks pretty"? Not only that, but during the intro cutscene, Link wielded the Master Sword as he explored the tunnels with Zelda. But Zelda was already a dragon at this point, recharging the Master Sword. So was there two Zeldas for as long as human Zelda was alive? And were there two Master Swords for 10,000 years, seeing as Zelda had the future copy back at the foundation of Hyrule, and the other heroes had a copy while they defeated Ganon in their timelines? Assuming this isn't an alternate reality and that there were in fact two Zeldas and two Master Swords at the same time, this also raises some issues. First being, why not exploit it and create a legion of Master Sword wielding Links and Zeldas? After all, if you sent Zelda back in time with the Master Sword, recover the tears, turn her human again before you send Zelda back, you have two Zeldas. Then you could send back the 2 to get 4, then 8, and so on. In no time at all, you could have thousands of Links with Master Swords and Zeldas. Ganon could never hope to even approach Hyrule. And I want to talk about the Zonai tech here. The Zonai tech in this game does not work from a gameplay perspective and from a story perspective. In Breath of the Wild, the ancient Sheikah were portrayed as brilliant people inventing tech that has since been lost to time. Rather similar to our Renaissance, technological marvels and inventions were being turned out every day. However, the Sheikah died off, their tech was lost to time, and in present-day Breath of the Wild, you only see scraps and remnants of it. It's logical, non-intrusive, and a cool bit of lore that couples with the gameplay. The Zonai tech in this game is the opposite. See, it now turns out that the ancient Sheikah weren't this old, wise race. Turns out that they were merely children compared to the Zonai, who did even more technological marvels. And you can basically use all of the tech, because you still have a living Zonai to talk to. The devs haven't been smart here. All they've done is retcon the Sheikah in Breath of the Wild to build up the Zonai instead. Now, it's not the Sheikah who are wise, they merely copy the homework of the Zonai. And from a gameplay standpoint, none of this tech works. At Breath of the Wild's heart, at most Zelda games' heart, mind you, Link is a lone soldier who cannot win through brawn, as it's one versus tens of thousands. Instead, Link must use his wits, skill, and growing arsenal of tools to fight smarter, not harder. However, in this game, all it takes is enough ancient tech to make a rolling death cart to run over fields of enemies. Link no longer is the clever warrior, he's the 80s action hero mowing down fields of enemies. The tech also really breaks exploration. In Breath of the Wild, until players found glitches, the fastest way we could move around was on horseback. While that could get you to a new location with some speed, it was still pretty slow. As such, the game forced you to slow down and explore, since you couldn't quickly and easily get from point A to point B. But in this game, the ancient tech changes all of that. Now you can build a hover bike so cheaply and quickly that you can get anywhere fast. Not only that, but most contraptions allow you to fly in some way, shape, or form. Because of that, I'm willing to bet most players spent over half of their playthrough not even touching the ground, because why would they? 2 fans and a steering column and off you go. No need to explore or see what's there, just zip to the next story location, then zip away. I also want to make a note here about the Great Plateau Sky Island starting area thingy. It's so boring. The Great Plateau in Breath of the Wild, there was so much to do. If you went down into the forest underneath the Shrine of Resurrection, you could find the old man who taught you to hunt. Explore along the cliff face down in that forest and you'd find a bokoblin camp that taught you that dry grass burned. Other places you could find cooking materials, there was enemies everywhere. There was so much to do, so much to explore, and the game encouraged you to see all of it. For this though, the Sky Island at most features a couple of sky shrooms and a stick. Maybe if you're really lucky, a large stick. Other than that, though, I mean, you can stumble across the Zonai Forge, but there's no incentive for you to leave the beaten path here. No reason to explore, no reason to see anything else out there. So really, even though it looks open and it looks amazing, gameplay-wise, there's nothing there. Also, the first goddess statue you come across clearly lays out one of my biggest problems with this game. In Breath of the Wild, when you stumbled across the goddess statue in the Temple of Time, you could choose to either get a stamina vessel, a heart crystal, or ignore it completely. You were given a choice as to what you wanted to do, and there was no right answer either way. Breath of the Wild stayed consistent with its theme of stepping back and letting the player do as they wanted, and rewarding the player for whatever choice they took. However, in this game, you are not only forced to use the goddess statue, but you are also forced to get a heart crystal first. The game wants to give you this illusion of being an open world game with letting you go anywhere, but instead funnels you down a very linear path. And one last thing I want to mention about the intro Sky Island area is that it's almost a one-for-one copy of Breath of the Wild's intro. You wake up in a cave, acquire important hardware that is currently useless but gets powered up later. Learn the basics of climbing, then open onto a wide shot of the world. You run across some mushrooms, then a little later, an apple. The first weapon you pick up is a tree branch. A wooden stick you can pick up near an NPC prompts said NPC to ask you whether or not you intend to use that wooden stick as a weapon. Time doesn't progress until you reach a specific map marker / quest location. Guarding said location is an enemy wielding a sword and shield, the first sword and shield you usually see. The first shrine the game points you towards gives you the ability to move objects in space. You must acquire 4 powers in 4 shrines on the starting island. Each shrine gives you a magic orb that powers you up slightly. After the first shrine, the spirit guide on the starting island stops you and tells you need to collect more shrines. The spirit guide then tells you how to pin locations on your map so you don't get lost. After acquiring all 4 powers, you must go to a special location to talk to the spirit guide, who reveals much of the backstory to you. The spirit guide then says he has done everything he can for you and gets dusted. After receiving the backstory, you are then free to leap off of the high place, touching down in Hyrule Kingdom for the first time.
Something very familiar about all this.
I mean, there's homage, and then there's Control-C, Control-V. Anyway, after leaving the Great Plateau, you're sent on a boring and empty walk to the outpost. Here you meet Purah, who is pleased to see you are alive, and for some reason is no longer short. She says Zelda is still missing, but that she might be found near the castle. You walk to the castle, where you talk with some NPCs who mention the floating castle. You then spot who you assume to be Zelda, who floats away. You then walk back to the outpost to talk to Purah, who says you should find Zelda. She also says you might want to check out some disturbances in 4 parts of the map, just cuz, and then launches you into the sky. Alright, let me stop again. I have to mention how disconnected the plot is so far. In Breath of the Wild, the beginning is very succinct, where the old man helps you to get your bearings, introduces you to the ancient Sheikah tech. He then tells you about the divine beasts and guardians, saying you'll need them to help defeat Ganon, and points you towards Impa to learn more about them. Impa then tells you where you can find the 4 divine beasts and sends you to them. Through all of this, there's a very clear plot of you need to beat Ganon, but you need help to beat Ganon. So here's how you can get the help you need to beat Ganon. Your goal is always in focus, and you always clearly know why you're doing what you're doing. In this game, you land in Hyrule and head to the outpost simply because a map marker sends you there, no deeper reason why. Once you get there, Purah sends you to the castle to look for Zelda. You see Zelda disappear, so you return to Purah. Now Purah sends you to the four corners of the map because there might be something interesting going on there that might be worth checking out. At no point is there any threat explained. At no point is there any motivation to do this other than Zelda is missing. There's no looming threat to prepare for, there's no apparent great evil to conquer, there's absolutely nothing driving you beyond a game of hide and seek with Zelda. And if I wanted to go play hide and seek, I'd just go hunt for resonance crystals in Deep Rock Galactic. I mean, if the game didn't want you to think Ganon was a great threat, then why was he included in the interactive cutscene at the beginning? The player, after watching said cutscene, now knows that Ganon is a threat and is coming back. But no one cares, no one says anything, no one does anything. In fact, it wasn't until the very end of my playthrough that the NPCs in the game even started to realize that they were facing Ganon. It's like the devs made this game all about finding Zelda and then realized days before launch that they should probably include Ganon somewhere. And I know the game is desperately trying to build up this big mystery of where is Zelda? But if you don't realize immediately when you see Zelda fly off after looking at you that something is wrong with that Zelda that you see, then I don't know what to tell you. The game is tipping its hand here so very early on that the Zelda you see is not Zelda. And as such, as the game tries to mystify me with this Zelda appearing everywhere but causing mischief as she goes, it just reinforces more and more to me that, hey, the Zelda you see is not Zelda. And I'll mention it later, but you even see Zelda in the past. After you free every dungeon, you see her in the imprisoning war cutscene. She's there, bold as brass. The game isn't trying to hide her, so you know exactly where she is. She's back there in the past. And as such, this grand mystery that they're trying to weave of where is Zelda and what is she doing constantly flying away from you falls apart faster than cheap single-ply toilet paper. Now here the story splits as you can pick any of the four disturbances, but I picked the Rito first, as that is the one the game encourages you towards. After making my way there, through a very uneventful walk I might add, you learn that the place is now covered in snow. In the sky you see a blizzard. Upon making it to Rito Village, you meet Tulin and his family. You find them mid-argument as Tulin, the child, argues with his parents that he wants to be treated as an adult. After greeting Link, Tulin then flaps off in a huff because he wasn't granted his wish. His parents, including Tiba, who helped you take down Vah Meadow, tell you that ever since the blizzard came to Rito Village, the place has been plagued by snow and winds. They ask you to find Tulin. After leaving Rito Village and walking through some tunnels, you find him on a mountaintop. Now he's pouting because some monster stole his bow. Now completely defenseless on top of a mountain, he asks you to recover his bow. Upon slaying the monster, you are greeted by Rito warriors, who chastise Tulin for flying away. They then tell Tulin that the cyclone in the sky is causing the snow, and that he is the only Rito capable of stopping it. They then beg him to save Rito Village with Link's help, and send him into the cyclone. After reaching the cyclone, you find it's actually the Stormwind Arc. After Tulin opens some locks, you fight Colgate. After the fight, the cyclone stops. Tulin is then drawn into a memory where the ancient Rito warrior gives his secret stone to Tulin, praises Tulin as the greatest Rito warrior, and says Tulin can save the day, with Link. You are then sent back to Rito Village, where Tiba praises Tulin, says that he was wrong for treating his child like a child, and thanks Tulin for saving the day. Tulin is, without a doubt, 100% wish fulfillment for 9-year-olds playing this game. From the very beginning, his first cutscene portrays him as a whiny, petulant child. The next you see of him is that he lost his bow to monsters. So not only is the game showing that he is a child, it is now reinforcing the fact that he is too young to be a warrior and that Tiba was right. However, the game then completely flips on that idea, suddenly switching to praising Tulin for being the bestest Rito to have ever existed. And could His Holiness Tulin please save their meek village from the cyclone? In no reality, existent or otherwise, would this ever play out. Tulin is a child, and thus should be treated as such. He is not a full-grown adult, he is not mature, he is not wise, he is not smart. Yet the game wants you to believe that this infant is somehow superior to the entire race of Rito because he can make a gust of wind? And on that subject, why on earth is Tulin the only one who can approach the cyclone? The Rito say that the winds are too strong and none of them can approach. Tulin alone, with his ability to create drafts forward, can approach. Except that makes no sense. He never uses his forward draft ability to his advantage, it's simply to help Link cross gaps. He isn't a better flyer than the other Rito, and his forward gust doesn't actually help him at all. So why on earth is he now the sole Rito who can save the day? Another thing, I don't know if you picked up my subtle hints during the story explanation, but Link is completely secondary here. In fact, you could write Link out of the story entirely and nothing would change. Tulin is apparently the only Rito who can approach the cyclone, so he does. Tulin is the one who can open the locks on the Stormwind. Tulin is the one who receives the Secret Stone. And Tulin is the one praised by the town. If you remove Link entirely from that section, the only change is that you don't rescue Tulin's bow. But the Rito warriors fly over soon after you get the bow back, implying that were you not there, they could have done it instead. So quite literally, Nintendo have written Link to be a secondary character in his own game. I cannot stress enough how stupendously stupid this move is. Like, did the devs just hate Link for some reason? Next, I went to the Zora domain. Here things get a little tricky as I have actually partially played through this area in my live streams. Subscribe that you don't miss them. Anyway, before coming to the Zora domain, I knew that I could find King Dorsalfin behind the waterfall. So, me thinking I was clever and could shortcut the story, decided to meet the king before the plot said I should. After all, there were some shortcuts like that in Breath of the Wild. For instance, you could skip Impa and do the Divine Beast before she tells you to, earning new dialogue. You could skip meeting Sidon at Inago Bridge and make your way to Zora's domain early, earning a new cutscene. So I found the king, and immediately got yelled at by Yuzu and turned away. Cause silly me, I thought I was playing a better game for a moment. Anywho, I begin the story proper by talking to Sidon's girlfriend in town, who points me towards Sidon, who's resting on Shatterback Point. Here he tells you to meet another Zora working on a tablet. After another quiet and uneventful walk to said Zora, I restore the tablet and learn a poem. Then I have another quiet and uneventful walk. Now I can find King Dorsalfin. So I head back there, grab a couple of scales, head up to the barren Sky Island, and shoot an arrow through some rocks. This opens up a beam of light in the reservoir. So I head back to Sidon. He has to be told what to do by his girlfriend, then we fight a sludge-like. After fighting said monster, he believes what his girlfriend said, jumps into the reservoir, and makes a whirlpool. You fall through the whirlpool into a cave below, because, you know, caves below bodies of water with holes at the bottom always work out well. After walking around in the cave below, you send up another beam of light. This causes a waterfall to come down from the water temple and let you and Sidon in. So you head in, Sidon gets stuck about 5 times because I kept missing mandatory cutscene triggers, and we turn on 5 faucets. After beating up what I think is supposed to be a comedic boss, Sidon is then drawn into a memory, where the ancient Zora warrior gives his secret stone to Sidon, praises Sidon as the greatest warrior, and says Sidon can save the day, with Link. You are then sent back to Zora's domain, where Dorsalfin abdicates the throne, Sidon becomes king, and promises to rule well with his fiancée. After playing through this section, I wanted to uninstall Tears of the Kingdom, convert it to physical media, and burn it in a trash heap so that no one would ever have to suffer through this again. First, Nintendo not programming in alternate paths. In Breath of the Wild, as stated earlier, there were a lot of sections you could either go through the story as intended or completely shortcut everything. Either way was correct, and you were rewarded with unique dialogue and cutscenes no matter which path you took. And Tears of the Kingdom is supposed to be an open world game like Breath of the Wild was. But I guess programming is hard, so the devs force you down one very linear story progression path. This goes against everything Breath of the Wild is and stands for, and is one of the worst design choices in the game. Next is Sidon. This game absolutely cannot let a male lead here, and for some reason turns him into a wimpy, pathetic waste of space. In Breath of the Wild, he was strong, courageous, and a go-getter. He was organizing the Zora to seek out Hylians so that they could wield the shock arrows necessary to disable Vah Ruta to save his people. He was on the front lines doing his best for his people. And what do we have now? A quote-unquote man hiding on a cliff top, too scared of his own shadow to help anyone in need, ignoring his problems, and waiting for his girlfriend to tell him what to do. It's weak, it's spineless, and it's a complete assassination of its character, and it's inexcusable. Speaking of changed characters that make no sense, Muzu. See, in Breath of the Wild, as I covered in my review, he started off hating Link, as he hated all Hylians and blamed Link for Mipha's death. However, through Link's actions and through the story, Muzu comes to realize that Link does have the Zora's best interests at heart, but Mipha was tragically lost anyway. So by the end, he comes full circle, asks for Link's forgiveness, and instead gives Link Mipha's trident. Now when we see him in Tears of the Kingdom, according to the timeline, he should still look fondly on Link. Yet somehow he's back to being a sandy butthole, and thinks Link is somehow responsible for King Dorsalfin's injuries, even though he saw it was Zelda, apparently, who did this. It's almost like the devs just retconned Breath of the Wild so they could just do it again. Next is the sheer length of this section. In total, there are 12 mandatory conversations. You talk to Sidon to start the quest, talk to the Zora researcher, talk to Dorsalfin and Muzu, talk to Sidon again after firing your arrow, talk to Sidon again after the sludge-like battle, talk to Sidon in the debris in the reservoir lake, talk to Sidon again before heading into the water temple, talk to Sidon at least 2 times on the way to the water temple, talk to Sidon once at the very entrance of the temple, talk to Sidon right before acquiring the secret stone, and talk to Sidon to end the quest. This could be excusable if there were a lot of action involved too, but there isn't. As every enemy can be avoided or defeated by Tulin's ghosts and Sidon, there are only 2 mandatory battles. Like, come on. The game isn't dialogue boxes, it's an action-adventure game. If there's one thing I absolutely do not care for in my action-adventure game, it's talking, 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 and even more talking. And I want to use this section to talk about the puzzles in the game. The puzzles in the 5 main dungeons are absolutely do not work at all. For instance, in the Fire Temple, there are many puzzles that require the use of Ultra Hand to manipulate carts on tracks. Then there's sections where you have to shoot targets while moving in the cart. However, none of these sections actually work because I can simply ascend and climb my way to the lock, bypassing everything entirely. For another example, in the Water Temple, there is one lock underneath the main central platform. There is fire blocking the one entrance to the area, meaning you can't just walk in. I genuinely don't know what the solution is to get there because I simply flew down below the structure, stood on an outcropping, and ascended into the middle. If the game is going to present me with the Gordian knot of puzzles, but let a legitimate solution be to cut the knot in half, then the knot should never have been made in the first place. It's a waste of time for both the devs and the players. Back to the game, I next headed towards the Gorons in Death Mountain. From very early on in the game, it had been apparent what the problem is. There is malice spewing from the crater of Death Mountain, so obviously the mountain has been corrupted. So I head into Goron Village. There we find Bluto criticizing the younger Gorons for doing no work, but rather laying around all day and eating marbled rock roast. Yunobo then swaggers onto the scene, barks at Bluto, and swaggers off. We learn that Yunobo has been weird ever since he put on a mask given to him by quote-unquote Zelda. So we are tasked with heading to Yunobo HQ and reasoning with him. Upon reaching Yunobo HQ, we see the Goron talking with Zelda. He then turns on us and battle begins. After a slow and relatively simple fight, the mask breaks off and he comes to his senses. Stopping here, let's discuss the game for a bit. First, let's talk about the mask and Zelda. From the very first cutscene in Goron Village, we know without a shadow of a doubt that this Zelda we've been seeing is a fraud. First, we know something was suspicious when she flew off at Hyrule Castle instead of talking to us. Then we knew she was a fraud when she brought one of Ganon's enemies to attack King Dorsalfin in Zora's domain. Now it's completely confirmed at this point that she's a fraud, as she's been seen dealing marbled rock roast to the Gorons. At this point, we, the player, are waiting for the game to reveal what we already know. And this is just lazy mystery box writing. If the story is the main focus of the game, then the player should never be 3 steps ahead of the story. Second, I initially thought the marbled rock roast issue was a side quest instead of the main quest. After all, we can see the trouble in the Goron domain. The volcano is spewing malice. My first instinct was head to the crater and see what the issue was. Instead, we're now embroiled in dealings with Gorons and don't seem to be heading to fix the crater issue at all. We eventually do fix it after clearing Yunobo's head. This feels less like a coherent plot and more of an excuse to bring the player to the next cutscene and flashy moment. Third, the fight with Yunobo is a complete disappointment. When we square off against Yunobo, we see that he has a massive club on his back. You know what would be incredibly useful in a fight? A massive club. You want to know what Yunobo doesn't use in this fight? A massive club. Like, seriously, he has a weapon. Use it. He even uses his club in the game later while his spirit is acting as your bodyguard. Honestly, partway through the fight, I came to the realization that this fight was nothing more than the devs lazily showing you the future power you get. Let's compare this to Breath of the Wild. During the memory where you first see Daruk, you learn what your future power is going to be through seeing Daruk use his protection. But that is just subtly shown as part of the cutscene, while the devs are also showing you what Daruk's character is and Link's interaction with him. So the devs managed to push the story forward while also showing you the future power in a 3-minute cutscene in Breath of the Wild. Here, they need 7 minutes for a fight to show you one thing. Back to the story, after freeing Yunobo from the mask, he sees Zelda walking out of his cave. He chases her, but she disappears. Now you're tasked with heading up to the crater, finally. So I take a route with some chest hair and reach the top without encountering a single enemy. At the top, a gigantic lava rock monster erupts from the volcano. You grab a nearby flying machine, load up Yunobo on the front, and launch him at the 3 heads. 15 seconds later, the fight is over, and you drop down into the crater itself. Instead of the crater being an actual crater like it was in Breath of the Wild, this time the volcano is actually a hole to the center of the earth that houses the fire temple. So I drop in, light up the nearest light route, get to the entrance of the temple, and realize my map marker is still on the edge of the crater above. So I reload my save, talk to Yunobo, then drop in, light up the nearest light route, get to the entrance of the fire temple, and once again realize I can't go in because Yunobo isn't with me. So I walk back to him, watch the obligatory cutscene again, then finally make it into the fire temple. Inside the fire temple, we see Zelda walk into a big room, then get covered by rocks. A gate locks behind her, preventing us from entering. Yunobo says that the only way to open the gate is by activating the 5 locks around the dungeon. So I meander through the fire temple and get all 5 locks open, heavily relying on Ascend to break sequences and completely bypass most puzzles. Yay! Then I meander into the room where Zelda disappeared. Here we do battle with Marbled Goma. This boss looks dangerous, but he only has 1 attack, and 2 variations of that attack, truth be told. So after blasting his legs with Yunobo and whacking the eye, the boss dies. Yunobo is then drawn into the memory, where an ancient Goron warrior gives his secret stone to Yunobo, praises Yunobo as the greatest warrior, and says Yunobo can save the day. with Link. You are then warped back to Goron Village, where Yunobo then comments on Zelda not reappearing, saying maybe she isn't who she seems. Keep that one in mind, it'll be important later. Yunobo is lambasted by Bluto and reduced to a shy man-child, and the Goron quest is complete. So far, this section shows the laziness of the devs more than anything. The marbled rock roast makes some sense, I guess, but it feels very tacked on. Again, you can see the issue with Death Mountain Crater, but you're stuck dealing with food-addicted Gorons. Then, after fighting Dark Yunobo and scaling the volcano, you face off against Marigia. Except, I have no clue what this thing is supposed to be. We already saw Yunobo's power in the fight against him, so it's not an introduction to that. This boss is never seen again, so it's not the Fire Temple boss. My only guess is that it's either a time sink for the devs to waste time, or it's supposed to be there to stop you from progressing too far in the story without Yunobo. Plus, as mentioned earlier, we can see the issue the Gorons are having with the corruption of the mountain. So we, as the player, know exactly where the story is going to take us, the crater of Death Mountain. However, the game forces us away from the crater only to eventually direct us there as some big reveal that we, as the player, have been waiting for some time. As I said earlier, if the player is 3 steps ahead of the story in a story-driven game, you done messed up. Not only that, but the characters in this game are complete morons. Yunobo's big driving factor leading him to and through the Fire Temple was wanting to talk to Zelda. He saw Zelda get taken by the big rock monster and thought she was inside somewhere, so you'd expect him to search for Zelda after the rock monster was destroyed, as that was his one and only motivation. Instead, he completely forgets she exists, talks for a bit, then takes the stone. It's only after you have warped out of the dungeon that Yunobo even remembers that he was looking for Zelda. I mean, if the devs can't keep one of the most simple character motivations that they introduced at the front of their characters, then what on earth have they been doing for 7 years? The Fire Temple also makes no sense. After the gate locks Zelda in the boss room, Yunobo says that we have to open 5 locks to drop the gate. But let's stop and think about this for a moment. The Gorons are miners. The gate is surrounded by stone. The Gorons often mine stone for food. Why is the best solution to not let the miner mine the stone around the gate, thereby bypassing the locks entirely and saving time? Also, the game really tries to set up fake Zelda in this area as being suspicious. First, there's her direct involvement with putting the mask on Yunobo. Then, there's her disappearances. Then, there's her getting covered by the boss in the Fire Temple. Then, Yunobo speculates that Zelda may not be Zelda. However, again, we as the player already know this. The game has already tipped its hand from the very beginning when Zelda floated away from us instead of talking to Link. Then, if you have done any other area besides the Gorons, you know that Zelda has been seen cavorting with other monsters in the ruins of the other civilizations. So I already knew that Zelda was fake from a half hour into the game. But again, the game thinks it's being so clever with this reveal, hinting at it but not exposing it. But we as a player already know what's in the mystery box, so this mystery completely falls apart. It's like a child trying to show an adult a card trick, but the child constantly gets it wrong and drops cards, then expects you to be completely mystified when they show you your card 2 hours later. Anyway, it's on to the 4th and final area now. I make my way to the Gerudo village and find everything in ruins. Sand has blown over everything, and the city is deserted, and Gibdos lay in the street. Since I've already been here in a previous playthrough, I head into the room I need to, move the desk, then drop into Gerudo Village Stronghold. There, we're tasked with finding Ryu in the northern ruins. After a quick and uneventful walk to the ruins, we find her struggling to use her lightning powers. She asks us for help shooting the dummies with arrows so she can channel her lightning to the arrow impact. After a few shots, she thanks you and can now use her power perfectly. Following this, you're directed towards Karakara Bazaar, There, you must once again use the power of Ryu to kill some Gibdos and save the day. If you failed at this section, I highly recommend you head to the nearest hospital as you may not have a pulse. After this fight, you see fake Zelda in the desert. Fake Zelda summons some cyclones. Ryu thinks fake Zelda is real Zelda for some reason. Now we're tasked with defending Gerudo Village from besieging Gibdos. We set up barricades and a cannon, then the battle begins. While defending the town, you can destroy their spawning towers to help make the battle easier. My first, and so far only time playing through this section, I think I had maybe 3 Gibdos make it to Ryu in total. Anyway, you defeat all 3 hives with the help of the Gerudo, who have attached Lizzle's shock horns to their spears, making me wonder what's so special about my fuse ability if everyone else can do it. Anyway, after the battle, you're tasked with staring at some art now to feel mentally invigorated.
You should now feel mentally reinvigorated.
After some dialogue, this points you towards a simple light puzzle. Go to some mirrors, turn them till they won't turn anymore, ta-da, you win. This reveals the Desert Temple. Let's break this section down. First, let's take a look at how you get into Gerudo Village. In Ocarina of Time, you had to sneak your way through the Gerudo hideout. It was long, it was hard, but it was a fun change from run at enemy mashing B button. At the end of it, you were rewarded with the entrance to the hideout freely. In Majora's Mask, you had to sneak through the Gerudo pirate base again. However, this time you cannot win entrance there. You must always sneak through. In Breath of the Wild, you had to solve a puzzle for how to get into the village. First, you had to initiate a quest outside the walls of the town, then speak to the guy in the bazaar. Then you could gain access while disguised. It wasn't as tough a challenge as Ocarina of Time or Majora's Masks, but it was difficult and encouraged you to think laterally. In this game, you move a box and walk 10 feet. I wish I was joking. It's a puzzle so simple, it makes you question why the devs took time to include it anyway. And after walking 10 feet, you're allowed to enter and exit the village at any time. So legitimately, I rage quit my first playthrough of the game right here because of this worthless, time-wasting filler puzzle. It's completely pointless, doesn't push you in any way, and simply exists because, well, it's Gerudo Village, so we had to put some quirk about gaining access, I guess. Now let's take a look at Ryu in the ruins. Very early on, we learn that the Gerudo Village is beset by Gibdos, and that the Gibdos are very dangerous enemies. If you don't have any elemental weapons, you're going to have a bad time. So naturally, Ryu just walks past all the Gibdos, leaves her besieged town, and practices her power in the northern ruins. Like, really? You can't train in town where the Gibdos are. And how does she make it to the ruins safely? This seems to be a common occurrence with her, so she somehow found a way to walk past all of these dangerous enemies completely unharmed? Why can't she help her citizens in the same way? You can't set up this besieged town if people can just leave whenever they feel like it. Continuing with Ryu, how dumb is it that she needs Link to shoot an arrow to focus her power? Like, is the metal in the arrowhead the thing that attracts the lightning? If so, why doesn't her and Link's weapons attract the lightning in the same way, given that they're much bigger? Is Ryu just so unattentive to everything around her that it takes Link pointing something out for her to even notice it? And yes, I do understand that this is a gameplay mechanic so that you can direct the lightning later, but from an in-universe perspective, this whole idea makes negative sense. Next, let's beat the dead horse of fake Zelda. Ryu and Link have seen fake Zelda in the desert, then very clearly seen her creating sand tornadoes to harass the heroes. This causes Ryu to wonder aloud what happened to Zelda and if Zelda were alright. These cyclones also summoned more Gibdos to Gerudo Village, and yet Ryu somehow thinks fake Zelda, who has now laid siege to her village, is somehow real Zelda? Like, is Ryu secretly an orange cat that doesn't have a turn with a brain cell? I legitimately do not understand how the NPCs in this game can be so brain dead as to not see some obvious foul play. And we, as the audience, sit back, having already seen through the smoke and mirrors and have realized what's going on, and are just scrolling through our phones waiting for the characters to put 2 and 2 together. Especially with Ryu, too. she should realize that something is wrong. In the first game, in Breath of the Wild, she was portrayed as a wise leader. While she was yet a child, she was still wholly devoted to her town. And as such, if her character stayed consistent, she should see what fake Zelda was doing to her town and say, even though it might look like Zelda, she is besieging my town. She is now an enemy. Instead, it's like Ryu's IQ just dropped between games because the devs just needed the story to happen. Finally, there's the Siege of Gerudo Village. Initially, when you could prepare for the battle, I was excited. I thought the game would give you the option of using the resources you collected during your time playing to build defenses and barricades. How cool would that be? Yobo said naively. If I could have an easier time of things if I came prepared to the fight. Silly me. That would have been the plot of a much better game where the devs actually cared about what they made. Instead, you get one barricade and one cannon, and that's it. Like, how do I only have one barricade? Garbage and refuse litter every street. Just collect some of it and make a wall. It's not that hard, and you did it once already, do it again. Finally, the light puzzle. I guess it's supposed to be entertaining and make you think. Instead, I followed the light beam, walked past the enemies on the ground, as I had done for hours already, turned a wheel, waited for it to click in place, and repeated those steps 2 more times. It's not hard and doesn't make you think. It's not deep, it's quite literally follow the line and do the thing at the end of the line. Anyway, back to the game. We now come to the Desert Temple. Outside of the temple is a gigantic hive. Here we meet Queen Gibdo. We fight her for a bit, then she flies off into the temple and we have to track her down. So I head in, walk along a corridor for a bit, take a few turns, wait for my bodyguards to fight every enemy for me, then make it into the temple proper. Now the Desert Temple is probably my favorite due to both the atmosphere and there being only 4 locks instead of the standard 5, so I can be done with it faster. After unlocking the 4 locks, we ride an elevator up to Queen Gibdo. No jokes on the game, you can easily get up to the arena with Ascend early. She acts like a regular Gibdo, meaning you need to weaken her with elemental powers before you can damage her. And I gotta be honest, this fight made me lose my will to live. But I powered through and finally beat her. This opens the door to the final secret stone. Ryu is then drawn into a memory where the ancient Gerudo warrior gives her secret stone to Ryu, praises Ryu as the greatest warrior, and says Ryu can save the day with Link. And you see the imprisoning war cutscene for the 4th time. Ryu is then teleported out of the memory. You gain her ghost as another bodyguard, making you completely invincible at this point. And with that, the Gerudo section is done. Going back over this game, I want to talk about the Queen Gibdo fight. This is not a fun boss fight. This is not a good boss fight. I don't think it's even a Nintendo game anymore. In fact, I think this is what Android Hell is. The number of times I died to Queen Gibdo one-shotting me out of nowhere was enough to make me want to break my controller. The number of times I was one-shot by Queen Gibdo because I had to chase down Ryu to talk with her to get her lightning power made me want to headbutt the nearest sharpened pencil. The fight took me almost 45 minutes to do and was less enjoyable than nuzzling a disc sander. And yes, I know I could leave the arena to go collect more hearts, but I thought I was almost done with the game and just wanted to power through to the end to be done with this game. Also, it's embarrassing for this game that I was able to repeat the exact same lines for every Secret Stone memory, and the only change I had to make was the character's name and race. It's repetitive, it's unoriginal, and no thought has gone into it. It's like they had a rough template for how the memories were going to play out, but didn't have time or motivation to make the sections unique, so they just left the template in. And you have to see the imprisoning war cutscene every single time, with very minor changes, in what is perhaps the laziest reuse of a cutscene ever, considering this is now the 4th time we've seen it. But anyway, I've helped the 4 races, so next on the docket is Ganon. First though, I go and collect all the memories. I'm going to review them in the order I found them, as that's just how most players will perceive the memories. And buckle up, because we're powering through these fast. First up, Gerudo Assault. You learn that Rauru, with his furry-loving wife and Zelda, fire a big ol' laser at some coming Molduga to stop Ganon's assault in the Gerudo. Except Rauru stops firing the laser before killing Ganon, whom he can see across the gorge. Like, if you can see the leader of your enemy and you have the power to attack and defeat him, why on earth wouldn't you end the fight right there? That means that since Rauru didn't use this power to stop Ganon, every death afterwards is a direct fault of his. Next up, A King's Duty. Here we learn that Rauru's wife has died, and honestly, I felt nothing. I'd only seen her in one cutscene where she didn't even talk, I had no idea who she was, at this point she was red shirt number 27, and yet the game tried to make me cry over her death. Next up, a show of fealty. Here, Rauru's wife is alive again. In this cutscene, you see Ganon paying homage to Rauru, cause remember the Zelda scene from Ocarina of Time? However, I'm left questioning why. At the end of the memory, we learn that Rauru, his wife, and Zelda all know that Ganon is evil. Why would you invite the evil king into your throne room to talk with them? Nothing of value was gained with having him over, and in fact, the good guy's cause was hurt as Ganon used the interaction to learn about the secret stones. So, quite literally, if Rauru had even a single brain cell, the entire plot of Tears of the Kingdom could not happen. The next memory I found was Zelda and Sonia. Here we see Zelda learning from Rauru's wife on how to control time. Here I think we're supposed to see Sonia's empathy and wisdom through her dialogue, but I'm grasping at straws here. Since this cutscene is so short yet poorly written, and a third of it is devoted to trying to explain time travel, and I already know that Sonia is going to die, I feel absolutely nothing towards her. As well, similarly to the cutscene where the champions receive their stones, you could remove Rauru from the cutscene and lose absolutely nothing at all. In fact, the only dialogue he has during the entire cutscene is him saying, "I don't know," and being taught by those around him. This continues his character destruction because he is supposed to be the king of the world. If he is the king, he is supposed to be the wisest, strongest, and/or most intelligent. Instead, he sits there like a lump on a log and stares into the middle distance for half the cutscene, then the other half that expresses his lack of knowledge. As well with this cutscene, this raises some questions I don't think the devs ever intended. In this case, we learn that time travel is achieved by, quote, recalling an object's memory and drawing that memory out of the object, end quote. Later, we learn that Zelda teleported herself back in time through her powers and secret stone. These two things cannot coexist. See, for Zelda to teleport herself back in time would mean that she would have to have been there once already to, quote, have the memory to be drawn out, end quote, in the first place. But she has no memory of being back there when she sends herself back in time. So how could she send herself into the past when, by the dev's own rules, she shouldn't be able to? The next memory I got was Unfamiliar World. Here we see Zelda immediately after she traveled back into the past. There she is discovered by Rauru and Sonia. However, once again, Rauru's character deconstruction continues. After observing Zelda, Rauru notices her secret stone. He remarks about this, saying that he realizes something must be special about her due to her having a stone. Sonia, giving the girl boss smirk to Rauru, chides him for needing the secret stone as proof to Zelda's specialness. Like, really? If the devs wanted to make Sonia all-powerful and all-knowing as they've done multiple times already, why not make her queen of the world and Rauru her vassal? Like, what's the point of Goat Boy at all if all he does is mope around when we first meet him, make dumb decisions by inviting a tyrant into your throne room, express his ignorance while his wife talks to Zelda, then be chided by his wife? How on earth is the player supposed to take Rauru seriously when the devs don't even have the decency to treat him like an actual character? The next memory I found was Birth of the Demon King. Ganon steals Sonia's secret stone and begins the calamity. Here we see one of the very rare instances where Rauru actually does something and deflects Ganon's attack that would have finished him and Zelda. Rauru then realizes he acted too much like a man there and teleports out with Zelda and Sonia's body. And I know the devs really wanted you to feel sad and cry over Sonia's passing, but I was rooting for Ganon. Nothing these rulers have done has shown in any way, shape, or form that they are fit to rule. They make terrible decisions, so let's burn everything to the ground and start over. Maybe we'll get someone smart next time. Plus, this scene falls apart even more if you think about it. Sonia has time travel powers. Her time travel powers work on objects. The Secret Stone is an object. She knows Ganon is after the Secret Stone. So why not send the Secret Stone back in time to keep the literal embodiment of evil from getting a hold of it? Because Sonia doesn't do this, Ganon gets the Secret Stone, and all the people he kills, she is responsible for. She had the power to thwart Ganon and did nothing. Before you say, well, that can't happen because she needs a Secret Stone to do that, let me remind you that Zelda is standing right next to her and also has time powers. Even if Sonia couldn't, why can't Zelda? See, this is the problem with time travel in media. It raises so many questions and opens up a can of worms that most writers aren't prepared to deal with. But the trouble is, Nintendo decided to open that can and dump those worms on the table. They even gave rules for time travel in previous memories. So they better be prepared to answer the questions that arise from their story. The next memory is a Master Sword in Time. This is Zelda's perspective of the Master Sword going back through time and her retrieving it. This is also the memory where we learn that Zelda is a scaly and decides to fly over Hyrule forever. This memory in particular, as a friend of mine pointed out, completely ruins the entire mystery of where is Zelda if you find it early. If this is the first memory you stumble across when leaving the plateau, you'll immediately learn that Zelda is going to become a dragon and that she has the Master Sword. So as the game continues to push the mystery of where's Zelda, you already know and are once again waiting for the game to catch up to what you know. Also, what an oddly specific power for the stones to have, that swallowing one turns you into a dragon. Like, did Dinral, Farosh, and Nadra all eat secret stones? I assume no one else has eaten a stone because there's no Zonai dragons in the sky. But if no one else has done this, how's come Raru's sister definitively knows that that is what will happen? Did they have to run tests on Hylian lizards or something and they turn into mini dragons? If not, how can she state what will happen if it never happened before? This plot point feels entirely out of left field, whose only purpose is to get Zelda back to the present. Also later, this is a really big issue. When Raru and company go to face off against Ganon after they have been beaten, why don't they sacrifice themselves, eat their stones, and kill Ganon? I mean, I get that it's not a great fate, but the fate of the entire world is at stake here. Just eat the rocks and save the world. I mean, Raru traps himself and Ganon for an indefinite period of time. Would it really have been a worse fate to eat the stone to destroy Ganon? The next memory I unlocked was Mineru's Council. This is the memory where we learn that eating the stone turns you into a dragon. Again, what an oddly specific trait that has never been tested before. The next memory I acquire is the Sage's Vow. In this one, we see all the sages band together, unified to fight Ganon, and they all get their own secret stones. And honestly, I found it hilarious that all the champions sounded like they recorded their audio while wearing a cardboard box on their head. This memory also raises some questions for me about the secret stones, such as, where did they come from? Were they made? If so, could more be made? If they were from the goddess, why did she make 7 of them? Traditionally in Zelda games, the goddess either had 3 parts or 1, producing 3 shards of the Triforce, or 1 goddess spirit and goddess sword. How did the Zonai come across them originally? Were they just sitting out in a field and some lone hiker stumbled across the most powerful stones in the universe? Why didn't Raru show the stones to the champions before Ganon swept through the Gerudo Desert? He seems pretty loath to give the the secret stones to the champions, but why? None of the champions misused them, and they would have been useful tools to stop Ganon's progress earlier. So why didn't Raru use the stones to stop Ganon before innocent people in the Gerudo Desert villages die? Is he a jerk or an idiot? If they were sitting in a room this entire time, why did Ganon bother killing Sonia for hers if he could grab 4 by breaking down a door? Why were they locked away? They're immensely powerful objects, surely they could be used for good, right? After all, the champions don't misuse them and show no desire to. So why not use that force for good? What exactly do these secret stones do? I guess they're supposed to amplify the user's power, but even that isn't clear. Ganon's turn him into a bodybuilder god who can destroy the Earth. Zelda's allow her to travel back through time. But Sidon, Ryu, Tulin, and Yunobo all use theirs to make a copy of themselves. So what do they do exactly? The next memory I found is Sonia is caught by treachery. Here we see the events leading up to and including Sonia's death. We see Sonia deflect fake Zelda with real Zelda's help. However, then Ganon pulls an
お前はもう死んでいる
and stabs Sonia anyway. Finally, a plot development I can get behind. This memory here completely spoils the whole "where is Zelda? Who is fake Zelda?" mystery the game has been trying to build up as well. The devs just straight up show you that fake Zelda is Ganon. So if you see this memory anytime after jumping off the starting island, but before having to go to Hyrule Castle, you already know what's going on, and once again are waiting for the game to catch up to you. Also, if Sonia and Zelda both knew that fake Zelda was coming and planned accordingly, why not have an entire regiment guarding Sonia? Like, you know the literal embodiment of evil is on the way, and if he stabs you, he's going to become even more powerful. Why bother with his BS, oh look at us being all powerful and stopping you at the last second? You are trying to stop the end of the world. Could you maybe have put more than 2 people on this? I don't know, maybe the Hyrulean army is unionized and they had their union-mandated coffee break during this or something? I don't know. The final memory I found was, where am I? There's really not much to say about this other than Zelda wakes up 14.3 billion years in the past and meets Rauru and his wife. After that not-so-quick recap, I'm left with one big question. What was the Master Sword's plan? We learn in Breath of the Wild that the Master Sword has some sort of sentience, playing on Skyward Sword's Fi, and I'm assuming that it teleported itself back in time on the balcony, because Zelda seemed surprised that it appeared. But if it did send itself back in time, why? It couldn't have known about the Secret Stones and Zelda's plan to eat one while holding the Master Sword in order to reforge it, because that hadn't happened yet in its current timeline. So if it sent itself back to Zelda, what was it hoping to accomplish? It must have had another plan to reforge itself, because otherwise why would it have gone back in time? If there was another way for it to come back, then was Zelda's sacrifice really necessary? Because the Master Sword would have reforged a different way and she could have gotten to the present some other way. But if the sword did know about the Secret Stones, how could it have planned on going back in time, waiting for the champions to be picked, wait for Ganon to take control of Hyrule, wait for Rauru to lose his battle and imprison Ganon, then wait for Zelda to learn about the Secret Stones while being trapped back in the past, then hope that she decides to eat a stone while holding the Master Sword so that it can reforge in her forehead to get back to Link to beat Ganon? How could it possibly know all of that would happen so that it could be reforged? It's almost like, again, the devs just needed it to happen and hope you didn't question it. After seeing all of these memories and sending Impa back to God, we head into the Forgotten Temple. Here we see all the tier locations on a map carved into the floor, and Impa deduces that it might be possible to bring Zelda back. But why is this map? Who made it? Since this map leads Impa to the realization that Zelda can return to humanity, did the map maker know that as well? If so, they are a horrible person for leaving her up in the sky for who knows how many eons, while having the knowledge that would have released her. Anyway, back to the game proper. It's now time to acquire the Master Sword and face off against Ganon. So I head into the Lost Woods to meet the Deku Tree again. Turns out he's got some tummy troubles that we sort out for him. After sorting him out, we see a cutscene where he talks about the Master Sword being able to power itself up over 9,000, then marks Zelda's location on our map in the present. So we trap down the map marker, land on Zelda, and unlobotomize her. Once the sword is free, we see a cutscene of Zelda telling Link the sword is the only thing strong enough to defeat Ganon. However, again, this raises even more issues. If Ganon, completely weakened and withered under the castle, was able to destroy the Master Sword, why not do it again? What was so special about his previous attack that he can't replicate? Is that like his Ultima move or something and we didn't give him enough turns to recharge it? Anyway, now it's time to finally face off against Ganon. All memories acquired, all temples defeated, all bodyguards assembled, let's do this. So I drop down below the castle, lose the companions for some reason, guess they're still running on 3G or something, and make it to Ganon. So the bokoblins spawn, the 4 races come to join me, and the battle begins. I churn through the bokoblins, then Lizalfos, then moblins. Finally, after the last battle with the Old One's army, it's time to face off against Ganon. Why is there a giant robot here? And why am I in a boxing ring? There's a whole nother dungeon.
Oh,
So I teleport out, and after spending an hour wandering through the depths looking for this last dungeon, I begin the quest to get to it. So after more dialogue with Purah, we head into the castle to look for Zelda. After heading to the map marker and approaching Zelda, she disappears and monsters spawn in at her location, proving there are no hot Zeldas in my area. So after defeating the monsters, we head to the map marker location and approach Zelda. She disappears and monsters spawn in at her location. So after defeating the monsters, we head to the map marker location and approach Zelda. She disappears and monsters spawn in at her location. So after defeating the monsters, we head to the map marker location and approach Zelda. She disappears and monsters spawn in at her location. So after defeating the monsters, we head to the map marker location and approach Zelda. She disappears and monsters spawn in at her location. So after defeating the monsters, we head to the map marker location and approach Zelda. She disappears and monsters spawn in at her location. So after defeating the monsters, we head to the Sanctum. There we are hit with the big reveal. The Zelda we've been seeing, the one who has been summoning monsters all over the world, injuring the leaders of the 4 races and causing mayhem and destruction wherever she went. The one we've already seen in memories is in fact Ganon, turns out to be Ganon. Ganon then monologues like every mediocre 80s action movie villain, and the fight begins with Phantom Ganon. I can't even be sarcastic about this fight. It's pathetic, it's boring, it's tedious, and it's an embarrassment to Ganon. The copies slowly walk towards you, slowly charge up their attacks, and then stumble after every attack. Like, this is supposed to be a clone of the embodiment of evil. While this is not the world-ending threat, it is a copy of it. I mean, really, you'd think the clone of evil would practice swinging a sword once in a while. Anyway, partway through the fight, the champions show up to help you fight the pathetic copies. Then Ganon realizes that his clone somehow skipped both leg and arm day, and decides to show the heroes a vision of himself and his army riding towards Hyrule. The vision ends, the allies realize it was a fake vision as there's no army currently riding towards them, and they come to the big realization that the person they've been facing off against, the big bad behind everything that's been happening to them in all of Hyrule, is Ganon. I can't anymore. I just can't. That's it. I'm done. I'm out of here. You can't make me finish this review.
Hi guys, Star Soldier 17 here. Yoppo's currently having a bit of a mental breakdown, so he asked me to step in for a second. Tears of the Kingdom was something I have to admit was probably overhyped, and to that end, that was probably my own doing. However, while the hype in some cases was justified, namely with the presentation of the graphical fidelity of the Switch, which is being pushed to its limits, and the game ran extremely well, but that's not why I'm talking to you right now. While the game had 5 years to cook in the oven, it still came out undercooked in regards to 3 things, and to me anyone with eyes should be able to see them. The first being the story was not cohesive, and had a total disregard as to what happened in Breath of the Wild. Looking at you, Divine Beasts. Not only that, but each sage was somehow worse than the ones in Breath of the Wild, and their powers were, for the most part, lackluster. Each cutscene finding them was also reused, and I was frankly shocked at the level of laziness from one of my favorite Nintendo teams. It was honestly like they fell asleep at the wheel and just assumed everyone would be okay with whatever story slop that they put out there, and was honestly not advertised as a standalone adventure. It literally made no sense to me. Also, Tulin. The depths in the sky was also something I was extremely excited for, but the fact that there was barely anything to do up above or down below besides throw an obscene number of light flowers just to walk around, or your other option of going on wild goose chases for things in the sky, or maybe just sit on a dragon because what else is there to do? Matt Mercer is also one of my favorite voice actors, but it just didn't feel right having him as Ganondorf. He just didn't really quite feel menacing, and he honestly sounded goofy.
Hello, I'm back now and totally not duct taped to my chair so that I finish this review. Anyway, we leave the castle and head into town. Purah then remarks about how she now realizes fake Zelda was acting weird, and she now realizes the evil guy we've been fighting might be Ganon. Even though there's absolutely no one else it could be. I mean, the story hasn't even tried offering another villain here. Purah also realizes that Zelda is stuck in the past. Finally, they realize that there is one more sage, and that we need to find Goat Girl because that's all important for some reason. Like, I don't know, Hyrule might explode if I only have 5 sages, even though Zelda is on my side, and that would be the 6th, meaning recruiting Goat Girl would make 7 sages. This whole section is so forced, contrived, convoluted, and ridiculous that I'm convinced this cannot be the actual story, but rather the initial storyboard that the devs just crammed in there. We already know fake Zelda is fake. Even if you haven't seen all the memories, Yunobo himself even remarks that he doesn't think the Zelda we've been seeing is real as we help him on his quest. Even without that, it's pretty obvious that Zelda, the bastion of goodness and grace, would not work with a sludge like Gibdos or other monsters, meaning that she must not be all she appears to be. Not only that, but if you've completed even one champion quest, you've seen the imprisoning war cutscene. In said cutscene, Zelda is standing in the past, bold as brass. We already know where she is. She's back there with the other champions and the goats. Once again, if you think about the mystery the game is trying to push at all, you realize exactly what's going on about 20 hours before the game. And once again, you're waiting for the game to catch up to where you, the player, already are in the story. Also, I'm completely baffled by everyone's reaction / realization that the big bad guy is in fact Ganon. This could have worked if there was a Zant-like enemy that we've been seeing throughout the story, but we haven't. We, the player, see Ganon in the interactive intro cutscene. We, the player, see Ganon in the imprisoning war cutscene that you're forced to watch 4 times. We fought Ganon in the Deku Tree. We've seen Ganon in the memories, and Ganon created all the monsters roaming Hyrule as seen during the Blood Moon cutscene. And, since this game takes place after Breath of the Wild, Purah has already seen Link and Zelda stop Ganon from inside Hyrule Castle. And now Purah remarks that she thinks Ganon might be behind this. Like, did she try out her tower launcher next door while the top was closed? Did she have a stroke? How can she be this uber genius who can make any technological invention that far outstrips anything we've seen so far, fail to realize the most basic of facts that even a literal toddler who plays this game knew? Before my brain explodes, let's get back into the game. Now it's time for the 5th dungeon, and very unlike Breath of the Wild, this quest isn't straightforward or plain at all. First, we have to head to the ring ruins in Kakariko Village. However, there's a guy that stops you from entering. So, in order to be able to investigate the ring ruins, I need to do another quest to get a camera. So I leave the ring and head back into the depths. I find Robbie, I get the camera. With item in hand, I head back to the ring. After, I kid you not, 3 button presses. Ascend twice, take picture. We head back to the ground to scroll through more dialogue boxes. And after talking with the people, we head into the jungle. There, we talk some more, walk some more, press a few buttons, and suddenly some storm clouds are cleared from a sky island. So we head up to the sky island, defeat like 2 monsters, press another button, then shoot a laser back down to the ground. So we grab the mask, follow the laser, and finally make it to the 5th dungeon. So to clarify how we got here, we walked, talked, got an item. Walked, talked, took a picture. Walked, talked, pressed a button. Walked, fought, pressed a button. Glided, walked, pressed A. all to open the last dungeon. Compare this to the Breath of the Wild, where the Divine Beast quests were very straightforward and focused on their goal. This feels indulgent and bloated for no other reason than to meet an average time played goal. It's not fun, it's not engaging, you don't learn anything here. It's walking through landscape we've already seen in Breath of the Wild, talking for 5 to 10 minutes to people who aren't funny, pressing a few buttons, and somehow ending up in the last temple. So, in the 5th dungeon, we are tasked with rebuilding a robot for the Owl Mask. After assembling the robot, use your robot to punch another robot. Like, what? This is the gameplay of Crash Bandicoot Mind Over Mutant. Fun game, by the way, go check it out, PS2. This is Rock'em Sock'em Robots. This isn't Zelda. Zelda games have never been Clash of the Titans. It's the story of a warrior boy who faces off against overwhelming odds, collecting tools that help him fight smarter, not harder, and saving the day through his cunning and intelligence, not sheer strength and spectacle. Anyway, we punch the big robot into the fence a few times, it then has enough of our crap and dies, and Robot Goat Girl gets her Secret Stone back. She is drawn into a memory, except it's not a memory because it's just more dialogue. We see the imprisoning war cutscene for a 5th time, and we learn that the robot we fought was supposed to be Mineru's original body. There's several issues with the whole temple. First, what happened to Mineru? We learn in the cutscene that the first robot was supposed to be her body, but I guess something happened to her? The game never says or explains, so I have no clue. But her first robot could not have killed her as she started working on another robot. So the best timeline I can construct here is that she fought the imprisoning war, lost, returned to her temple, built a robot, something happened to that robot that she didn't use it, started work on another robot, while also making the mask that would house her spirit, then she died and the mask somehow moved to the Sky Island? And somewhere in there I guess she set down her Secret Stone and couldn't find it again? Like, why did she not maintain possession of the Secret Stone if the robot could not have killed her? How did her mask make it into the sky if her temple is deep underground? What happened to the first robot that she felt the need to make a factory to build the second one? What happened to her that she could not build the second robot completely? And why, when you head to the Secret Stone, does she act surprised that there is a robot there if she built it? I mean, surely she'd think her creation would be there if she built it and left it there. Anyway, back to the game. After helping Goat Girl, we get another cutscene, but this time we see Rauru trapped Ganon in place, sacrificing himself to do so. Even though I'd like to remind the audience that he could have just blasted Ganon on the cliffside during the one Molduga fight, but we'll just completely ignore that for the sake of the story. I guess we're supposed to feel sadness at Raru's sacrifice here, but I'm just guessing. The game has done nothing but belittle him in dialogue and cutscenes, and the only time we see him on the Sky Island, he's just moping about pining for the past. And as such, I feel absolutely nothing towards him. Anyway, after that cutscene, we're thrown into another cutscene. This time, we see Goat Girl and Zelda talking about the Master Sword, how it is the only thing that can stop Ganon. And the devs didn't miss any chance to take a dig at Link here, because the scene heavily implies that Link isn't special, but rather anyone who could wield the Master Sword well enough could defeat Ganon, as it's the sword that's special. After these two cutscenes, we then talk to Goat Girl. She tells us everything we've done so far was actually her grand plan, that she planned every step of Link so far. What? What? How could this have been Mineru's plan all along? Did she plan that we'd talk to Purah, that Purah would notice seismic anomalies across Hyrule, that Purah would recognize Link and tell Link about said seismic anomalies, that Link would check them out, that through convoluted quest lines Link would make it to the dungeons, that there would be a champion with Link every single time that Link went into these dungeons, that the champions would get the Secret Stone, that fake Zelda would be spotted in Hyrule Castle, that Link would head into the castle to defeat Phantom Ganon, that Purah would then send him towards the 5th dungeon, that Link would acquire the camera rune, that Link would use the rune to take a picture, that the people of Kakariko Village would be rebuilding the ring ruin so that Link could be pointed in the right direction towards the 5th dungeon, that would lead him on a quest through the jungle to push some buttons, that the buttons would reveal a Sky Island that Link would explore, that Link would uncover the Owl Mask and take it into the depths, that he would build a robot body and that she could inhabit that body and join his team. And all together could face off against Ganon. Like, how? Remember, this plan was made 14.3 billion years in the past. Sapura didn't even exist at the time. How could Goat Girl have not only known that there would be a person called Purah, but that she could be a scientist who would move to Hyrule Castle Town, that she would be intrigued by seismic activity, and that she would recognize Link? You can't even say Zelda told Goat Girl, because Zelda never saw the seismic activity start. According to the timeline of events, Ganon wakes and bench presses the castle, Zelda falls and goes back through time, and it's only then that the seismic activity starts. So at most, Goat Girl could have known Purah would exist and do science stuff, but would have no inkling that Purah would even be able to study the seismic activity half a continent away. Yet without all of that, her entire plan would fall apart. And if this was all Goat Girl's plan, why make it so convoluted and contrived? Like, if she planned all of Link's steps, why couldn't she have left big markers saying, Link, go here for temples and bring a friend to give them a stone? Not only that, but it completely emasculates Link once again. If this was all Mineru's plan, then everything you've done up until this point hasn't been your exploration or discovery. Mineru planned this. Every action you took, every monster you beat, every step along the way, you had no free will. You were simply acting out Mineru's plan. Once again, Link is not special. He is not important. He is not smart or wise. He is simply a pawn being pushed around by others, doing and saying what others dictate. And also, what about Rauru? If this plan concocted by Zelda and Mineru is supposed to be guiding Link in the future, how could anyone get Rauru to follow the plan? Remember, when Zelda falls into the pit, she is teleported away before Link can grab her, and she never sees Rauru's hand rescuing Link. So the last bit of the future she knows is that Link is falling. She doesn't know Rauru does in fact save Link, and that Rauru brings Link to the Sky Island. So how could she plan for Link to end up being there when there's no possible way for her to have that knowledge? Also, if this plan was somehow set in motion 14.3 billion years in the past, then how could Rauru be following it? The plan was concocted after the imprisoning war, meaning that Rauru could never have heard it. Then when he reawakens, he's moping around the Sky Island and cannot communicate with Mineru, who, let's remind you, is just a mask. So somehow he ended up following Mineru's and Zelda's plan to a T without the girls knowing that he'd rescue Link, that Link would end up on the Sky Island, all without any way of communicating to Rauru after he awakens that this is what is to happen. Like, this is beyond God levels of knowledge. This is just farcical. Almost like the devs wanted Mineru and Zelda to be even more powerful and wise than they already were, so they wrote in this dialogue to sound impressive without once considering the massive implications it has. Anyway, last bodyguard recruited. Link is now a roving army instead of a solo adventurer. We head back down the hole under the castle, the companions lose their cell phone reception once again, we land in the arena, the champions join me again, and we fight the Dark Beast's army. After a cutscene where we see the champions fighting all the bosses we already fought and not needing Link's help, we go on to face Ganon alone. He's chilling on a pillar, probably still trying to figure out why he didn't kill Link or Zelda in the intro interactive cutscene. We wake him from his revelry, he gives one of the cheesiest bad guy speeches I have ever heard in my life, then the fight begins. Now, I will admit that seeing Ganon perfect dodge was impressive, and an interesting turn of events. After beating on him for some time, he decides to quit playing around or something and powers up even more. Now his health bar is even longer than any previous boss health bar, because more is better, right? However, this fight loses its cool factor once you realize it's basically a glorified Phase 1. He can now capitalize on perfect dodges, but most every other attack is just a souped up version of his previous one. So just Flurry Rush his Flurry Rush of your Flurry Rush until you win. Then Ganon decides to embrace his inner Scaly and eats the stone as well. We head into the skies joined by Zelda and the fight begins. Like, where do I even begin with this? Ganon Phase 1 was so lame it was almost funny. Like, again, this is the embodiment of pure evil. And the most he can do is slowly walk towards you half the time. That's not impressive. It's not dangerous. It's just slow and boring. For a better example of this, look at the Mithrix boss fight from Risk of Rain 2. There's some times where he will slowly walk around, but those times never last for more than a second. It's done to throw you off your guard, make you never really know what he's going to do next. With this Ganon phase, I quickly realized what would cause him to dash and what would keep him slow walking, and quickly learned how to abuse the enemy AI. Next, why does he power up? Again, this is the embodiment of pure evil. Why wouldn't he pull out all the stops to beat Link? He knows Link, he's fought Link before, and he's lost to Link numerous times. Why not power up from the get-go and give yourself the best chance possible of winning? It's like Ganon has access to unlimited power, but decides not to use it at the beginning because, I guess he wants to give Link a fair chance at killing him? And Ganon's health bar, I get it's supposed to be special or big or freak you out or whatever, but it really doesn't. The one thing that was so impressive about Calamity Ganon when you went to fight him was how little his health bar moved. You knew you were in for a tough fight because as you were wailing on him, you barely did a 64th of his health bar. You knew you were in for a long fight. Here though, instead of making it dense and making you feel like you're making no progress at all, they just stretch it out really long, but every hit chunks off a good 1/8 of it. So you never really feel like you're up against a hard fight, you just feel like you're up against a normal boss that just has a slightly bigger health bar. And when he ate his secret stone, I legitimately thought the game was about to be brilliant for once. After all, we were taught explicitly that if you become a dragon, you lose all memory and sense of who you were. So I thought this was Chekhov's dragon, that watching him eat the secret stone, that the devs would stay consistent, that Ganon would truly become all-powerful, but would completely forget that he wanted to conquer Hyrule. I thought that would be a clever and smart way to end the fight, that the man so bent on becoming more powerful would end up destroying himself, destined to be all-powerful forevermore, but never know to use it, fated to fly above the Hyrule he so wished to destroy until the end of time. See, that would have been smart writing. I would have liked that. Instead, the devs once again changed their plot, making Ganon remember everything, and you get another giant beast fight. Back up in the sky, you have to chase down Ganon a few times, punch a few eyeballs, then hack the stone from his forehead. After doing that, Ganon dies, Zelda becomes a human, and we have to catch her falling. However, I do find it funny. You cannot fail this. At this point in the game, I legitimately let Zelda fall for a few minutes before realizing you had hit an invisible floor and weren't actually dropping anymore. But you catch her and land in a body of water. Then Zelda talks with you, at which point I was yelling, "I don't care, please end," at my screen, and thankfully the credits roll. You do also get an end credit scene where Goat Girl shows you around, instead of Rauru, cause screw the dumb goat boy who spent billions of years trapped under Hyrule Castle sacrificing his life to save the world, am I right? And that's Tears of the Kingdom completed. The story is convoluted, contrived, and most of the time completely comes from the developer's backsides. I checked to see who wrote it, and to my shock, it's the same writers for Breath of the Wild also wrote this game. The characters are either unlikable, too stupid to be alive, or smugly smart waiting for their colleagues to catch up to them. They flip between knowing nothing and knowing everything so that the story can move forward, and back again without any rhyme or reason to any of it. The powers you get don't feel complementary to the world, but rather feel like tacked on additions that pull you out of immersion. And half the time they completely shortcut the puzzles. And two of the powers you get, Fuse and Ultra Hand, many enemies can also do, begging the question as to why they're special in the first place. Most of the map is just a copy and paste from Breath of the Wild, and the new areas, mainly the Underground and Sky Island, are so empty and barren that they feel added just to give the player more. Because quantity is so much better than quality, am I right? The combat in this game does not feel engaging, and I'll just say it. The Breath of the Wild engine was not made for horde combat. In Breath of the Wild, you'd occasionally get the gang of bokoblins out to get you, but usually they'd wait one at a time to get a shot at you. Here, it's not uncommon to be facing off against 5+ bokoblins, but it's okay because your allies do the fighting for you. The champion's ghosts following you around completely destroy any remnants of the carefully crafted solo adventurer in a post-apocalyptic world vibe that Breath of the Wild absolutely nailed. Now you can have up to 5 companions all fighting for you, and it just feels like taking 2 action figures and smashing them together. There's always something happening so that you never feel like you can just relax and explore. Being able to make Zonai contraptions means that most of the time you won't be exploring, but rather hoverboarding to your next destination. The time travel makes no sense and opens up so many questions the devs either did not want to, or more likely could not, answer. While overall this game is technically more impressive than Breath of the Wild, in every other way it completely falls flat to its predecessor. And all of this and more is why Breath of the Wild succeeded, whereas Tears of the Kingdom failed. Thank you so much for watching. I've been meaning to make this a review for a while, and now that it's done, I wanted to take a look at previous Zelda games as well. Next one up is going to be Ocarina of Time, a game many love, but I actually have only played once through fully. And big thanks to SnarfSoldier17 for helping out with his review while I was indisposed. But anyway, that's all I have for today. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, and all that jazz that the good YouTubers say, and I shall see you all in the next one. Take care.